Hello and welcome back to my channel. Once again, this is Victor Magariño, and for the past couple of weeks I have been on vacation, so I haven't really been able to upload any videos, even though I do want to continue uploading more, but I do not really have internet connection where I'm at, so it's kind of complicated to do research and to upload videos and so on. I will, however, try to upload videos like this one more often, and as soon as I'm over with my vacation, I will continue to upload videos, hopefully better videos with better audio quality and so on. And today I'm here to speak about a very important topic for me, which is the conversation that I had with Aron Ra regarding Marxism. And I say it's important for me because it was the first time that I appeared in public, essentially because of that. And before I begin, I want to make clear what my views of Aron Ra and his work is. And for me, Aron Ra has always, since the moment I met him, uh, he has always been a role model for me. I mean, I grew up intellectually listening to him debating creationists and so on. And in my childhood, I was a fundamentalist Christian, a Catholic. So for me, I learned a lot from Aron Ra, and I think that the work he does is very necessary, and I really respect him. I mean, I really respect his work and everything he does. And so I had a lot of expectations coming to that conversation because I know that he's a rigorous person that likes facts and likes to see other people's opinion, and that tries to get the best out of everything he reads, listens to, etc. But in this conversation, I have to say that I was disappointed to some extent, even though I think that the conversation was productive and it gave me the opportunity to present a position that is a little bit not too common. It's quite ignored in the current intellectual, especially in the new atheist movement, which is that of Marxism, right? And I got the opportunity to speak to one of the persons that is in this in this movement, in this line of thinking about this topic, which has been ignored so much that it needed to appear somehow at some point, right? But I think that the main limitation of our conversation was essentially the issue of definitions. That we really weren't able to get the definition straight. And I was trying to give him the definition of socialism, of communism, and of Marxism that the experts in the topic use. I mean, I cited David Harvey and so on, which are the people that really know about this stuff, right? And he really wasn't buying into it. I mean, I was a little bit frustrated by the fact that he really wasn't trying to open his mind to what the experts in this topic really have to say about it. I mean, he had this view that communism is authoritarian, which is not true. Under the definition of communism, the standard definition of communism is a stateless, moneyless society where there's no classes as well. So by definition, that is not authoritarian. That is the closest thing to anarchism you can think of. And this was my point, that anarchists and communists essentially come from the same tradition. In the First International, back in the 19th century, they worked together. And they have, from the origins, they really worked together until they realized that their objectives, that the means through which they wanted to achieve, that communist society were different. And so there has been a lot of disagreement ever since, but the origins are essentially the same. So understanding communism through the lens that the original thinkers of communism, and even nowadays the major thinkers of communism, also view communism through this lens. So understanding communism through this lens is essential. And Aron Ra really didn't want to hear that. He had this already established opinion of communism as some sort of authoritarian, the government rules everything society, and he really wasn't able to get past that. And for me, this was a little bit disappointing because I know he's the first one to criticize the people who do this regarding the issue of religion. I mean, he's the first one to criticize creationists for labeling him as an evolutionist or for trying to make Darwin look like a Nazi and so on. And this uh, this limitation of the conversation was obvious from the very beginning and stayed throughout the entire conversation, which is what really didn't allow the conversation to go deeper. I also want the conversation to focus more on the issue of Marxism itself. And Marxism is not the same thing as communism, it's not the same thing as socialism. They are different things, although related. And for me, defending Marxism was the main goal there. Defending the method through which we can critically analyze capitalism, is essentially what I wanted to do there. And because we were so focused on this issue of the definition of communism and socialism and so on, we really didn't get, I didn't really get to do that, which was essentially what I came there to do, right? And these couple of limitations didn't really stop me or the conversation from going into a good path. I mean, we still talked about things that were important, and even though we could have given things a lot more thought, as it went, as an introduction, it was all right. For me, it was all right. There's also this issue where he asked me, why do I regard myself as a Marxist and why don't I come to the conversation labeling myself as a communist right away? And I gave a response in that conversation, but let me explain it a little bit better. So the reason why I label myself first as a Marxist is because I regard as the most important thing the society that we live in right now. And the society we live in right now is capitalism, not socialism, not communism. And I want to understand the society in which I live, which is the one that I have direct access to, right? I want to understand it as best as possible, and I want to be able to critically analyze it as best as possible. And Marxism, which is the methodology by which we do this, provides me with the best analytical system that there is. And since my focus is on capitalism and how to overcome the immediate contradictions of capitalism, thinking about what the future will yield, thinking about the future communist society is not the priority there. And even though I do consider myself a communist, because I do support the establishment of a communist society, I still regard myself first as a Marxist. And there's not a contradiction here, because Marx was also a communist and a socialist. So you cannot say that labeling myself first as a Marxist has any problematic for this for me or for anyone that does the same thing. There was also a point in the conversation where we actually got to speak a little bit about capitalism and about the contradictions in capitalism, but it didn't really get anywhere because Aron Ra essentially said, well, I consider capitalism as inherently dishonest, and he didn't really like capitalism that much. And really the reasons he gave for it were a little bit not too scientific. He just said, well, for me capitalism is bad because whenever you're driving and you see a small sign that says free pizza, and then you approach the sign, and as you approach the sign you realize that there was a small segment there that said that actually is not free, you have to pay X amount and so on. And for him this was the problem with capitalism. And this, I mean, it's not a problem inherent to capitalism itself, lying about certain stuff, but it's certainly one of the things that we find, lying with advertisement and so on, which are bad, I guess, in capitalism. But really the critique of capitalism goes a lot deeper. And I would have wanted to go a lot deeper into the contradictions of capitalism, the contradiction between use value and exchange value, all these the really scientific theories, the exploitation and so on. But we really weren't able. I mean, we also had a limited amount of time, so this was obviously one of the points I would have wanted. And in fact, there were people in the comment section who said, well, I mean, if your problem with capitalism is that someone lied in a pizza sign, then, I mean, whatever, right? But the problem is a lot more complicated than that. Obviously, it is. And even though I would have wanted to speak more about that, we also didn't get the chance to do this, which was another limitation in the conversation. And I don't really want to be too critical with Aron Ra for this, because he was honest enough to admit at the beginning of the conversation that he didn't really know enough of the topic to even have a solid opinion. But I mean, if you understand that you don't have a solid opinion, then why would you try to impose this certain rhetoric and these certain sorts of beliefs uh, about about communism being authoritarian and so on to someone that has researched this a lot more than you have, and that has backing up his opinion, the opinion of the experts? I mean, this was a fault of Aron Ra, but I mean, I don't blame him too much for it. But even though the conversation had these sorts of limitations, I still think that we covered some important ground and we were able to give the conversation some productive insights. I mean, we did get to talk about the history of socialism a little bit, and I was able to defend somewhat the history of socialism when he tried to say that, well, capitalism always wins over socialism because color TV wins over non-color TV and so on, which are pretty simplistic arguments that don't really bear any empirical validity whatsoever. I also feel that the conversation was productive because in this conversation we were also able to provide some more insight into the topic that we discussed, and I was able to clarify certain things and certain misconceptions that we had. I mean, in the United States, especially, there's a lot of misinformation regarding this issue and regarding some other issues related to Marxism, socialism, etc. And it's always hard to know. It's always hard to debate or to have a conversation with someone that has been fed so many lies throughout their entire life. And even I was fed many lies throughout my childhood and so on. So I do understand that these conversations are complicated and that, you know, they are never going to go as good as you might expect them to go. But even though this conversation had these obvious limitations, I still feel that we covered some important ground and that we made some improvements. With this being said, I am open to talking to Aron Ra again. I am open to having another discussion, maybe going deeper into certain issues that we weren't able to go a little more profound in. But that is obviously also up to him. He said that he doesn't have a solid opinion and that he's open to hearing what other people have to say and to be convinced by other people. So I will very happily get to give him uh, my opinion, which is the opinion, the standard Marxist position, and so on. And if he wants to do it again, if he wants to have me again, perfect. So that's it for this video so far. Let me know if you have any suggestions, any comments, any questions, and well, I will see you in the next video.